Thank you for the introduction. Before I get into the topic of relationships and how to help you foster better relationships, both with your peers and more importantly with yourself, I'm going to ask a quick question, and that question is, what do you think is the biggest cause of addiction globally? Any answers? Go for it.
Love.
That's very powerful, but no, not that. Anything else?
Peer pressure?
Pardon, sorry?
Peer pressure.
Peer pressure, also very good. I like the deep answers you're getting here, guys. That's good. Anyone else? Serotonin? Serotonin, likely, but anyone else? There was a hand over here. Yeah? Alcohol. Yes. Okay, so all of these are, you got one?
Loneliness.
Loneliness, exactly. And what causes all of these is the question I've asked myself and the question I'm going to speak to you today about. And essentially that revolves around the drama triangle. And it looks a bit like this, and you're probably thinking, what on earth is that? And I'm about to speak to you about that today, and I'm going to go on and talk about what each individual role means and how it is detrimental to you, your relationships, and everybody in your life. But first of all, I'm going to explain to you why on earth I care about this, and why on earth you should care about this. And that's a little bit about my story. So in high school, I was one of those girls who suffered with drama queening. I got myself into a lot of conflicts with my friends. Eventually, I managed to push all of my friends away from me by gossiping about them behind their backs and then telling them to their faces a different story to what I told the others. And you can all judge me all you want, but you have done that in your lifetime. And on top of that, I had a partner at the time who I relentlessly pushed away and was dishonest with. And in every single conflict I had with him, I managed to make it about me and how he should feel sorry for me because of my shaky childhood growing up. And I always found an excuse. I always found an excuse as to how I was the victim in that dynamic. And essentially that bred in my life, and it carried on, and it was cyclical, so it kept happening. And then I came to uni and I thought, I'm going to escape this. I'm going to get away from that, and I'm not going to do it again. Boom, straight away in uni. So I was in all these new friendships, and it was fine for a while, and then conflict happened, and I started doing the same things. I started to go complain about that conflict to my other friends, to turn them away from this person. And then the hardest situation for me when I realized, wow, Lucy, you really need to change, is when I actually got into my next relationship. And I cared about this person a lot, and I worked on it, and I tried to work on it, but every single conflict, I got into the same habitual patterns. Every time he would go out at night to go clubbing, I would try and manipulate him into staying at home by saying things like, oh, you don't understand, you know, when you've been cheated on, you know, you get anxious that they're going to cheat again, stuff like this. And essentially, I tried to trap him into coming home. And I tried to do everything in my power to get my unspoken wants met without just saying to him honestly, look, I'm a little insecure, can you give me some reassurance? And that's what this model has taught me to do. And there are essentially 3 roles we undertake. And the one that it pivots most around is the feeling of the victim. And that's not the victim in the same sense as in a fairy tale who is the damsel in distress. It can be like that, but essentially the narrative that the victim peddles is that they are being oppressed and that they are helpless and that there is no one or nothing that can help them because they are being persecuted by either the world or a person. And they keep this rhetoric and let it play out in all the relationships they have. And essentially that leads on to the persecutor, who keeps the victim oppressed by being either manipulative, controlling, sometimes they will yell, or it could just merely be a life situation, like a teacher giving you a bad grade and then you constantly thinking that that's their fault because they did bad teaching, and it couldn't possibly be anything to do with the amount of hours you put in. And it's this mentality that breeds into every single daily life that you encounter, you'll be the same way. And then there's the rescuer role, and you're probably all thinking, great, there's a hero in this dynamic. Absolutely not. So the rescuer role is actually one of the most terrible in this dynamic because it feeds into the victim's rhetoric that they are powerless and helpless. And essentially what the rescuer will come and do is come and hold the victim's hand, and they will say, hey, let me help you. And they foster a system of dependency whereby the victim needs them for reassurance, and the victim needs the rescuer to know that what they're doing is fine and that they do not have to take personal accountability for absolutely anything they do. And this breeds into a vicious cycle. And the most important part about this triangle is it is not objective. It is completely subjective, and to a persecutor, they genuinely might think that they're a victim. And the best way to illustrate this is a politics example, because we all love those, right? And that is, if you see the far right, they genuinely feel like they are victims to cultures coming in and taking away their identity. Whereas the far left constantly think that they are merely rescuing the victims of minorities who they see as victims to help. And that plays out in dynamics in relationships, in the bigger picture. It can play out in everything. And it leads to this really dramatic cycle whereby not a lot of good things actually happen in this cycle, and it leads to what the Cartman called the dreaded drama triangle. And these roles interplay, and essentially it feeds into victim consciousness. And then you're all probably thinking, what on earth is victim consciousness? And this truly means that whereby you cannot take personal accountability for what you do. You have such a short-term focus that you don't think of the bigger picture, and you don't ever question why you react to the situations you do. So when conflict arises, it's so much easier to peddle tears and to make everyone feel sorry for you and think, oh, poor me, than it is to think, why on earth am I reacting to this in such a dramatic way? And it's so much easier to use tools of manipulation to get what we want, which is anxiety alleviation. And it's so much easier to get someone to do what you want them to do when you peddle this rhetoric. Instead of thinking of the bigger picture, as I just said, it is more just short-term focused. And it's purely like dramatic in the sense that it can actually lead to bigger problems if you do not get it fixed. And a good example of this is something I suffered with recently. So I got an infected wisdom tooth. If anyone can relate, it's a horrible thing, not nice. And it basically caused me a lot of pain. And then I went to the dentist and he was like, yeah, you can get this wisdom tooth removed. That's the ultimate goal. But I'm going to give you some antibiotics to take the pain away. So he did that and he gave me these antibiotics and the pain went. And then I started thinking, I don't need the surgery anymore. Now the pain has gone away. I don't need to undertake that surgery. It's not necessary. And then I started thinking about this, and I started thinking, well, actually, if I don't get the surgery done, then the longer-term problem will not, it will never go away, because the infections are going to keep coming back. And that is how a victim sees life, the short-term problems, and they take the easy way out. They take the paracetamol, they take the antibiotics, but they never undertake the surgery, which is harder because it takes years of self-progression and self-development and knowing who you are and peddling your passions in life. And essentially this will interplay until you realize how to come out of it. And the best way to do that is the David Emerald, Thank you. The David Emerald dynamic that he's created, which is the empowerment dynamic, whereby he's changed the roles essentially so that they all work together and get you out of the victim consciousness and into empowerment consciousness. And essentially how he's done that is he's converted the victim role to creator. So instead of channeling this inner powerlessness that the victim peddles, that they cannot be helped and life is purely acting against them, the creator will actually think, okay, this situation isn't ideal, I'm being challenged by this, but how can I get out of it? What creative situations can I think about to actually get out of this scenario? And then in that sort of mindset, they are thinking not what they do not want, which you do as a victim. You want to alleviate fear, but instead you're thinking what you do want. What are your passions? What are the things you actually care about? What makes your heart dance? The things that you genuinely care about, distinct from the things that you are so fearful from that you end up acting in dramatic senses. And then in this dynamic, the persecutor role converts to challenger. So instead of keeping this person oppressed, the challenger comes in and actually questions their status quo. So instead of making them feel oppressed in that sense, you would actually challenge their worldview by asking questions like, do you not think that you're acting this way because of ... Or do you not think that you're peddling this rhetoric because you're afraid of ... And when you first hear those things, you kind of go on the defensive and you're like, well, no, you don't know me like, I know me. And it kind of questions that. But then if you come out of victim consciousness, you learn that in your creative mindset that you can actually get out of these mindsets if you listen to what the challenger and co-creator is trying to say to you. And then finally, which is the most important change, is rescuer to coach. So the coach, like an ordinary coach, is a master in their field. They have been through the dreaded drama triangle before, and they know what it's like and the difficulties surrounding being in that trap, because that's what it is. And scientists also, and people in this field, psychologists, presume that 99% of the population is in victim consciousness. So if any of you feel attacked, you're not alone. It's literally everyone. So the coaches are that 1%, essentially. And they're those people in your life who know you better than anybody and that you can foster true intimacy with. And what do I mean by true intimacy? No, I don't mean being this close and being really like close-knit with them. What I mean by that is being able to expose all your traumas alongside them and work at them together. And you don't have to feel afraid because of your traumas, and you don't have to feel embarrassed. And this person knows you to a T so that they can analyze why you're reacting in the way that you are reacting. Instead, if you panic because your partner is out, for example, and you think they're going to cheat on you, instead of what a rescuer would do, would be like, oh my gosh, yeah, girl, you need to like send him a message and make sure he comes home because that's your rights, you know. You have a right to be jealous. You do not have a right to be jealous. You can feel jealous, but you do not have a right to react. And that's what I'm teaching you today. You cannot choose the situations that happen to you, but you can 100% choose how you react to them. And the coach instead would say, do you not think that you are just reacting in this way because you didn't get much attention as a child and you're wanting his attention now? And that hurts to hear, and that's something that I've been told personally. And it's not nice, but it does challenge you into thinking, okay, this isn't the best version of myself that I can possibly be. And that's what the coach wants to see in you. They don't want to rescue you. They don't want to fix you. They want you to be the best version of yourself that you can truly be. And that's why it's a beautiful dynamic as opposed to the last one. And you're probably thinking, how on earth, that's all airy-fairy, that's great, how do I do that? And that takes work. That is two things that I've established that takes. That takes honest communication, and that's distinct from just telling the truth. That's a great thing to do as well. But emotional, honest communication. Instead of saying to your partner when they go out, for example, instead of manipulating them into coming home, you say, I am feeling really insecure, please reassure me. Because what do you want in that scenario? You want to be reassured. That's what your honest want is. It isn't to manipulate them, it is to have them come back. And this kind of perspective kind of makes you understand the other side and makes you understand why they would be potentially viewing you as the persecutor instead of you as the poor innocent victim. And in this shift, there is more personal accountability because the co-creators are constantly ensuring that the creator is being their best self and is not pandering to their victim rhetoric. It's holding them accountable for the times where they have thinking that they are innocent and that the world is just acting on them, because that is not truly what is going on here. And once you take accountability for how you speak, how you communicate with your peers, you then can do the second step, which I've identified, of trauma alleviation. And every single person in this room has got traumas. That doesn't mean you need to have been attacked as a child. It doesn't mean all these deep, dark things that could have happened. You could have been left in a supermarket for 20 minutes unattended and panicked, and that's enough to embed trauma within you. That's enough to cause abandonment fears. Every single one of us in this room has traumas, and there is nothing to be embarrassed about, but it is not okay to justify them as a cause for your action. You need to work on them. And that takes time. That is a progression. That is not an event. And it takes time. You can read multiple books, and after the discussion, I can recommend a few to you if you need that. Podcasts. It's about focusing on you. And if you've got 15 minutes a day, which you all do, I really recommend that you spend that just on yourself. Whether that is just writing in a journal, whether that is just having a bath and listening to a podcast, whether that's writing down 3 baby steps you took in pursuit of your passions, in pursuit of the things you want, rather than the things that you don't want. That eventually builds and makes a habit. And everyone knows how habits are so difficult to break out of. And it's very difficult because a lot of you, I know, have got your degrees going on, you've got family issues, you've got friends, dramas here and there, but you can make 15 minutes realistically, right? You've got 15 minutes. It's not about how much time you physically have, it's how you allocate that time. And if you care enough to foster these relationships, you will make that time. And I kind of see it as in like a flower. If you leave a flower by itself and you don't water it, and you don't put it in front of sunlight, me and my roommates know this very, very well, it's gonna die, it's gonna get ill, and it's gonna die. It's not gonna bloom, and it's gonna wither away. And that's exactly the same process that goes on with your mind. If you do not work on it, if you do not consistently water it with information, feed it with information, Put it in the sunlight. Sunlight can mean anything from your friends who make you smile to the things you like, arts and crafts. Tap into your creative side. If you do not do that, then it's going to wither away and it's going to die. And in light of that, the last question I have for you is, do you want to have your mind set free from that? Yes. Thank you very much.